For 3,000 years, the galaxy had enjoyed an unprecedented peace. The treaty was signed long ago, bringing an end to the chaos and conflict that once plagued the stars. The Galactic Council, made up of representatives from dozens of alien species, worked together to keep the peace intact. Life flourished in every corner of the galaxy, and war had become something of the past. Everyone believed this era of peace would never end. But on the edges of this peace, things were stirring. A species known as the Erathans had grown restless. Once a proud and fierce race of warriors, the Erathans had long been part of the Galactic Council, but their power had slowly waned over the centuries. They had become overshadowed by newer, more peaceful civilizations, and in the quiet corners of their empire, discontent began to brew. For the Erathans, the galaxy had grown too soft, too complacent. They felt their honor had been forgotten, their strength ignored. There was no challenge left, no one to prove themselves against. They began to believe that the only way to reclaim their former glory was to break the peace and show the galaxy that the Erathans were still a force to be reckoned with. One day, the Erathan High Command made a decision that would shock the entire galaxy. They sent a message to Earth, the homeworld of humanity, accusing them of violating the peace treaty. The Erathans claimed that humanity had been mining in a region of space that was considered sacred, an area designated as a neutral zone by the Council. They demanded that Earth cease all operations immediately and submit to their authority. The message sent ripples throughout the galaxy. The Galactic Council was instantly thrown into confusion. A breach of the treaty was a serious matter. If the Erathans were right, this could spark a war that would undo everything the Council had built over the last 3 millennia. There were immediate emergency meetings, calls for action, and a general sense of alarm. Back on Earth, the response was far different. When the news hit, the world's governments gathered in their war rooms to discuss the situation. People feared the worst. News channels across the globe reported the Erathan threat with dramatic headlines. Pundits and experts speculated on the capabilities of the Erathan fleet. The tension was palpable. Could humanity survive a war with a race as powerful as the Erathans? However, amid all the panic and the predictions of doom, there was one reaction that stood out. A casual message from Earth's United Nations Council quickly circulated to the Galactic Council and the Erathan High Command. Bring it on. The message was short, to the point, and, most shockingly, utterly unconcerned. Humanity wasn't afraid. They didn't panic. They didn't cower in fear or beg for mercy. Instead, they laughed. They weren't laughing at the Erathans, but at the absurdity of it all. After 3,000 years of peace, the first thing that came to Earth's mind wasn't fear, but amusement. The idea that a race of warriors, after centuries of quiet, would suddenly demand war over something as trivial as a mining dispute seemed ridiculous. For the people of Earth, it was almost as if the Erathans were a group of children throwing a tantrum. Who needed to be afraid of such behavior? The message from Earth wasn't just a statement. It was a challenge. The humans weren't worried about the Erathans. They were confident. After all, Earth had been through more than its fair share of challenges, and somehow they always came out on top. Earth's military forces, while prepared for any situation, were equally unconcerned. They didn't rush into a frenzy of action or start mobilizing at once. Instead, the response was measured. The ships of the Earth Defense Fleet remained in their docks, as if waiting for the Erathans to make their next move. The human government knew they were ready, but they didn't feel the need to show it just yet. In fact, Earth's leaders didn't even see the Erathan Declaration as a threat. They viewed it more as a strange distraction, something to be dealt with, but not worth panicking over. The Galactic Council, seeing the human response, was unsure whether to laugh or be deeply concerned. The Erathans, meanwhile, were not prepared for this response. They had anticipated fear, confusion, or even a desperate plea for peace. Instead, they found themselves facing a species that was eerily calm. This was not the reaction they had expected. They had believed their mighty fleet, their warlike reputation, would intimidate the humans. But humans didn't seem intimidated at all. They weren't afraid of anything. They were, in fact, quite the opposite. They were amused. The Erethan High Command, confused and angry, tried to push forward with their plans. But there was something nagging at them. Why wasn't Earth reacting the way every other species would? What were they missing? In the end, the Erethans had underestimated humanity. They thought they were dealing with an easy target. But what they didn't realize was that Earth had never feared anything before. And they certainly weren't going to start now. The Erethans were not used to being ignored, especially not by a species like humanity. For centuries, they had prided themselves on their fearsome reputation and unmatched battle skills. They had defeated entire fleets in the past and crushed enemies who dared to challenge them. But this time, things were different. The humans didn't seem afraid at all. They didn't even seem to take the threat seriously. The Erethans were confused. To them, Earth was a small, relatively unknown planet, part of the Galactic Council, but rarely at the center of attention. The Erethans had expected humanity to quake in fear when they sent their ultimatum. Instead, the humans simply shrugged it off and laughed. This was an offense the Erethans couldn't ignore. They had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering their allies, and mobilizing their fleet. To have their plans mocked so easily was unacceptable. The Erethan High Command, furious and desperate to regain their dignity, made a decision. They would show the galaxy just how powerful they still were. They would send a fleet to Earth, an overwhelming force, one so massive that it would be impossible for any species, even the humans, to resist. The fleet that the Erethans assembled was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in millennia. Hundreds of warships, each one equipped with state-of-the-art weapons, shields, and battle systems, were gathered at the edge of the Erethan system. These ships were not just designed for war. They were designed for domination. The fleet was a statement, an expression of the Erethans' strength, and they intended to make it clear to the galaxy that they would not be disrespected. As the ships set out, the Erethan leaders broadcasted a message to Earth, filled with the typical bravado. Prepare to face your end, humans. Your time has come. You will not survive the might of the Erethan Empire. The message was full of threats, designed to rattle humanity. But the humans on Earth were unfazed. They had already received the message from the Erethans, and their response had been clear. Bring it on. In fact, the response had been so calm that it made the rest of the galaxy even more uncertain about humanity's true nature. Humanity had always been a little different from the other species in the galaxy. While other civilizations relied on diplomacy, alliances, and power struggles, humans had something else. Resilience. They had fought wars on their own planet for centuries, survived plagues, natural disasters, and even the threat of extinction. They had built themselves into a species capable of achieving great things, and they did so without the need for the kind of grandstanding the Erethans so often relied on. As the Erethan fleet approached, Earth's leaders were ready, but they weren't scrambling. There was no panic, no chaos. Humanity's top military commanders met in secure locations to discuss their plans, but even these meetings were calm. There was no need to rush or make hasty decisions. The Earth Defense Fleet, despite being vastly outnumbered, was fully prepared for any scenario. The real question in every human's mind was simple. Why did the Erethans think they could intimidate them? For the humans, it wasn't about the size of the enemy's fleet or the power of their weapons. It was about something else entirely. They believed that no matter how big the threat, they could outthink it, outblast it, and, if necessary, outfight it. The humans knew they had the advantage. They were unpredictable, resourceful, and they had something no other species seemed to have: a sense of humor in the face of danger. As the Erethans continued their journey toward Earth, their commanders eagerly awaited the humans' response. They expected to see fear, confusion, or perhaps a plea for mercy. What they did not expect was for humanity to respond with absolute indifference. When the Erethan fleet arrived at the edge of Earth's orbit, they found a quiet, still planet. The humans had not sent their fleet into space to meet them. There were no messages of surrender or panic. Instead, the Earth Defense Fleet remained in their hangars, waiting. The humans had already made their point. They were not afraid. And then, without any warning, the Erethans encountered something unexpected. As they tried to send their communications to Earth, they found themselves blocked. Their systems flickered, their ships began to malfunction, and their advanced weapons systems sputtered and failed. The humans had prepared something they had never expected, an advanced defense grid, one that was far beyond anything the Erethans had anticipated. The Erethan fleet was forced to retreat, completely disabled before they could even make their first strike. Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The Erathans, once the most feared race in the galaxy, had been humiliated by a species they had underestimated. The rest of the galaxy was stunned. How had this happened? The Erethans had the most powerful fleet in the galaxy, and they had been completely shut down by Earth without firing a single shot. But Earth wasn't celebrating. They weren't rubbing it in the Erathans' faces. Instead, the humans did what they always did: remain calm, unaffected, and focused on the next step. To them, it was just another day in the galaxy. And as the Erethans retreated to lick their wounds, they were left with a lingering question. How had they misjudged humanity so completely? The Erethans had never been so embarrassed in all their history. Their mighty fleet, their carefully planned attack, and their belief that they were invincible had all been shattered in an instant. Earth had not only stopped their advance, but had done so with such calm precision that the Erethans could hardly believe it. Back in the Erethan command center, panic was starting to set in. The fleet commanders couldn't understand how their systems had failed. Their ships, which had never once faltered in battle, were now useless. They had expected to encounter a few difficulties, but not something on this scale. The humans had outsmarted them, and it was clear that Earth's technology was far beyond what they had assumed. But the Erethans weren't ready to give up. They weren't the type of race to retreat without trying everything. They quickly regrouped, recalibrating their strategy. If direct attacks weren't working, they needed to find another way to break Earth's defenses. They had underestimated the humans once, but they wouldn't make the same mistake again. Meanwhile, on Earth, there was no sense of victory. No one celebrated the defeat of the Erethan fleet. Humans weren't used to celebrating battles they didn't even have to fight. In fact, most of Earth's population didn't even know the details of the attack. They had gone about their daily lives, just like any other day, confident that their defense systems would take care of the threat. But there was one thing that everyone noticed: the silence. The Erathans, once so loud and full of threats, had suddenly gone quiet. For the first time in ages, Earth wasn't hearing bombastic messages from across the stars. The galaxy's most feared race was keeping their distance. Back at the United Nations Council, world leaders sat together in a rare meeting. The discussions were calm but serious. No one was sure how long this uneasy peace would last. The Erathans had failed this time, but they were a proud species. It was unlikely they would back down for long. Humanity had sent a clear message to the galaxy. They weren't afraid of the Erathans, but deep down, they knew that the Erathans wouldn't take this defeat lightly. The real challenge was yet to come. The Earth Defense Fleet had been on high alert ever since the Erethan fleet was defeated, but the people of Earth had no intention of living in fear. They trusted their systems, their technology, and their ability to think on their feet. And so, the preparations continued. Humanity didn't just stop at defense. They began working on ways to ensure that no such surprise attack could happen again. Meanwhile, the Erethans were considering their next move. Their pride had been wounded, and it burned. They had believed that a show of force would send the humans running, but instead, they had been humbled. They could not allow such an insult to stand. The loss of their fleet was only a temporary setback. They would come back stronger. The Erathans sent out new orders. Their next plan was not to attack directly. They would try something different, something that would require more subtlety. They would try to divide humanity. If they couldn't break Earth's defenses, perhaps they could break Earth's unity. If the Erathans could turn humanity's allies against them, they would stand a better chance of victory. They started to spread rumors, sowing seeds of doubt among the Galactic Council about humanity's intentions. But the Erathans didn't know humanity as well as they thought. The humans were united, more than they had ever been before. The people of Earth had always been strong in their diversity, and now that strength was becoming their greatest asset. They didn't just have advanced technology, they had the ability to work together like no other species in the galaxy. Earth's leaders didn't fall for the Erethan tricks. Instead of being divided, the nations of Earth grew closer. They shared more information, improved their technology, and came up with new plans to defend against whatever the Erathans might throw at them. In fact, the Erathans' attempt to divide humanity had the opposite effect. It made them stronger. On Earth, there was no panic, no fear, only determination. The humans knew the Erathans were still out there, plotting their next move. But they also knew that whatever the Erathans did, they would face it head-on. Earth had faced much greater challenges in the past, and they had always come out stronger. This would be no different. The Erathans' new strategy of manipulation would take time to unfold, but it was already clear that humanity was no longer an easy target. If anything, their victory over the Erethan fleet had made them more confident and more united. They had proven that they could defend themselves, not with brute force, but with intelligence, preparation, and unity. And as the Erathans watched from the shadows, plotting their next move, they had to wonder, had they miscalculated even further than they thought? As the days passed, the tension between Earth and the Erathans continued to simmer. The Erethan fleet had been forced to retreat, but the Erathans hadn't given up their mission. They were a proud species, and despite their failure, they were still determined to force humanity to bow before them. The more they tried to plot, the more they realized that Earth was no ordinary planet. On Earth, life seemed to return to normal for most people. The threat of the Erathans had not been completely erased, but humanity was used to facing challenges and overcoming them. People went about their daily routines, knowing that the defense systems were on high alert, ready for anything. The governments of Earth worked together more closely than ever before. There were secret meetings, classified discussions, and new technologies being developed at a rapid pace. Humanity's military leaders, scientists, and engineers were all focused on one goal: ensuring that Earth would never again be caught off guard. One of the most surprising things about Earth's response was its calm. There were no widespread panics, no outbreaks of fear. Humans were not worried about their fate, and this puzzled the Erathans. How could they be so relaxed in the face of such a powerful enemy? The Erathans could not understand the human mindset. Their strategy to weaken the unity of Earth had failed. The rumors they had spread about humanity's alliances began to lose credibility. If anything, the attacks on Earth's unity had made the humans even stronger, even more united. Meanwhile, the Erathans began to gather their forces once again. They couldn't let the defeat go unanswered. But this time, they would need a different approach. The direct military assault had failed. Now they would turn to more subtle tactics, hoping to wear down humanity's resolve over time. The Erethan fleet set a new course toward Earth, but this time, it wasn't with the same loud bravado. Instead, they decided to try a more indirect method. They would attempt to infiltrate Earth's communications, influence some of its governments, and slowly chip away at humanity's confidence. They hoped that by undermining Earth's leaders, they could eventually divide the people, turning them against each other. In the quiet corners of space, the Erethans worked their plans. They sent agents to infiltrate the Galactic Council and other planetary systems, hoping to find sympathetic allies who would turn against Earth. They knew they couldn't win through direct warfare alone. Instead, they would attack Earth's unity, its strongest point. On Earth, the leaders were aware of the Erathans' plans. They had been briefed on the possibility of infiltration, and humanity's intelligence services were working around the clock to prevent any disruption. Every communication, every piece of intelligence from the stars was carefully examined to ensure that no hidden agenda could slip through the cracks. The United Nations set up a special task force, made up of the best minds Earth had to offer. Their goal was simple: protect the unity of humanity at all costs. They knew that if the Erathans succeeded in sowing division, it would be humanity's downfall. But they were determined to prevent that from happening. The Earth Defense Fleet, though not as large as the Erathan forces, was more than capable of defending the planet. With their technology, their ingenuity, and their unity, the humans knew they could hold their ground. They had proven it once already. But they also knew that the Erathans were relentless. They would try again, and they would not stop until they had either won or been destroyed. As the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the pressure grew. The Erathans' new strategy was taking its toll, but humanity's defenses were holding strong. In the shadows, the Erathans continued their subversive efforts, but they found it increasingly difficult to make any significant progress. Humanity was not as easy to manipulate as they had thought. There were moments when the Erathans believed they had a breakthrough. A few minor human leaders had been swayed. A few isolated incidents of mistrust had emerged, but none of it was enough to cause any real harm. Humanity remained focused, their unity unbroken. But the Erathans didn't give up. They began to escalate their efforts, sending more agents, more whispers, and more sabotage. The stakes were higher than ever. They had already lost one battle, and they couldn't afford to lose another. This time, the stakes weren't just about Earth's survival. It was about their pride, their honor, and their place in the galaxy. On Earth, the pressure was starting to build. The constant tension of waiting for the next move, the next attack, was beginning to wear on the people. But even in the face of this, they remained resolute. The people of Earth were not afraid of the Erathans. They had faced worse challenges in the past, and they had always overcome them. But one thing was certain: the Erathans were not going to give up. The next move would be crucial, and it would determine whether humanity would continue to stand tall or whether they would finally be broken. The Erathans were about to make their final push, and this time, the outcome was uncertain. Would Earth stand its ground, or would the galaxy's most feared empire finally break through? Only time would tell. Months passed, and the tension between Earth and the Erathans continued to grow. Both sides knew that the final confrontation was inevitable. Earth had proven its resilience, and the Erathans, once confident in their superiority, were now more determined than ever to bring humanity to its knees. On Earth, the world's leaders had started preparing for what they all knew was coming. The United Nations continued to hold regular briefings with Earth's military, scientists, and strategists. The defense systems were fine-tuned, and new technologies were being developed every day to counter whatever the Erathans might throw at them. But it wasn't just the leaders who were preparing. People everywhere were starting to feel the weight of the situation. The news was filled with updates about the growing tension in the galaxy. While most of the world's population carried on with their daily lives, there was an undeniable sense of anticipation in the air. The unknown was always the hardest to prepare for. However, Earth's people remained calm. Unlike the Erathans, humanity didn't need constant reminders to stay united. Their greatest strength had always been their ability to work together, no matter the challenge. In cities around the world, people were continuing to innovate, to invent, and to build. Scientists, engineers, and military leaders collaborated across borders to strengthen Earth's defenses. But the Erathans were not sitting idle. They had regrouped, and their pride was their greatest motivator. The defeat they had suffered was still fresh in their minds. They had underestimated humanity's ability to think, adapt, and surprise them. Now, they were ready for the final phase of their plan. This time, they would not be defeated by Earth's technology. Instead, they would find a way to strike at humanity's very core, its spirit. The Erathan commanders had spent months refining their tactics. They knew that Earth's strength lay in its unity. So, if they couldn't divide humanity through infiltration and subtle manipulation, they would have to try something far more direct. The Erathans made a bold decision. They would launch a surprise attack, not against Earth's defenses, but against its most vulnerable points, its cities. The plan was daring, and the stakes were higher than ever. If the Erathans could break the will of humanity, they could break Earth. If they could make humanity fear them, they would be able to control the galaxy. This time, they would use fear, not force, to win. But Earth's leaders weren't blind to the situation. As soon as the Erathans' plan became known to the highest levels of government, the world's military forces went into overdrive. Cities were reinforced, new systems were put into place, and Earth's communications network was more secure than ever before. Humanity wasn't going to make the same mistake again. In a hidden command center, far beneath the surface of Earth's most secure military base, the most brilliant minds on the planet came together. Their goal was clear: to stay one step ahead of the Erathans. The strategy was a simple one. If the Erathans couldn't get to Earth's cities, they couldn't break the human spirit. The focus was on making sure that the Erathans could never launch a surprise attack again. Humanity would remain one step ahead. At the same time, the Erathans had begun to prepare for the worst. They knew that humanity wasn't going to sit idly by. They knew that Earth would be ready for any move they made, but they didn't care. The pride of the Erathan Empire was at stake, and they were willing to take any risk to ensure their dominance over the galaxy. The Erathans sent out their fleet, but this time, they were different. They had learned from their mistakes. Instead of charging toward Earth head-on, they deployed smaller, stealthier ships that could slip through Earth's defenses unnoticed. The Erathans were trying to find a way in, and they had learned to be more cautious, more patient. But as the days passed, something unexpected happened. The Erathans' plan, despite their efforts, began to falter. Earth's defenses were stronger than they had anticipated. The smaller ships were detected before they could get too close, and the Erathans found themselves in another battle they hadn't planned for. Humanity's defense systems, tested and refined over the past few months, were holding up. And so, once again, the Erathans found themselves at a crossroads. Their fleet was retreating, but this time they couldn't be sure of what the future held. The situation was more complicated than it had ever been before. The humans had proven to be more adaptable than the Erathans had ever imagined. No matter how hard the Erathans tried, they couldn't break Earth's resolve. As the fleet retreated into the depths of space, the leaders of the Erathan Empire gathered in their command center. They knew that if they didn't change their tactics soon, they would lose this war. They couldn't afford another failure. The battle for the galaxy was now a battle for the human spirit, and the Erathans had to find a way to break it before humanity could become too powerful. Back on Earth, there was no panic. There was no sense of fear. Humanity was determined, and with every victory, they grew more confident. They had proven that they were capable of holding their own. But as the Erathans retreated, one thing was clear to the leaders of Earth: the battle was far from over. The storm was still brewing, and it was only a matter of time before the Erathans made their final move. The quiet that followed the Erathans' retreat didn't last long. On Earth, people went about their days, but they could all feel the weight of what was coming. The Erathans weren't finished yet. Their retreat was not a surrender. It was just a regrouping. Earth knew this, and the world's leaders, though calm, remained ever vigilant. The governments of Earth had grown stronger in their unity. With the Erathans' attacks continuing to loom on the horizon, the human race had learned to rely on each other in ways they had never done before. Military alliances were tighter than ever, and scientists worked day and night to refine weapons and technologies that could protect the planet. Every person on Earth understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about proving that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. Yet, despite their preparations, no one could predict what was coming next. The Erathans were like a storm that had only paused for a moment, and everyone knew that another attack could come at any time. The Erathan leaders, sitting in their command centers, knew they couldn't afford another failure. The galaxy was watching, and their reputation had taken a heavy blow. Their pride and honor demanded they find a way to defeat humanity, quickly, decisively, and in a way that would leave no room for future rebellions. They decided to use their greatest weapon, something they had been saving for the perfect moment: their devastating planetary cannons. These weapons were capable of destroying entire worlds in a single strike. The Erathans, however, were no longer the only threat to Earth. Over the months, Earth had grown more confident and more powerful. They had developed new strategies and technologies, and most importantly, they had begun to understand their enemy. They now knew that the Erathans were not invincible. They could be defeated. As Earth's leaders prepared for the worst, a breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A team of scientists working on Earth's most advanced weapons uncovered a possible flaw in the Erathan planetary cannons. The technology behind these weapons was powerful, but not perfect. If Earth could figure out a way to exploit this weakness, they might just have a chance to stop the Erathans once and for all. The human race had already proven they were more adaptable than the Erathans had given them credit for. They had overcome everything the aliens had thrown at them so far. Now they had one last chance to end the war before it even began. The plan was risky. It involved infiltrating the Erathan fleet, which was no easy task. Earth's military had to find a way to get close enough to disable the planetary cannons before they could be used. The mission would require the best of the best: soldiers, engineers, and tacticians who could think on their feet and act quickly. Among the humans chosen for this dangerous mission was Commander Sarah Ellis, a brilliant strategist and a hero from the previous battles. She had earned the respect of her peers and the trust of Earth's leadership. She had seen the strength and courage of humanity in action, and now she would have to lead her team to the heart of the Erathan fleet. The mission was simple in theory, but nearly impossible in execution. Sarah and her team would board a stealth vessel and infiltrate the Erathan ships. They would need to disable the planetary cannons before the Erathans had a chance to launch their next attack. Every second counted. As the team prepared for their mission, the air was thick with tension. They knew what was at stake. If they failed, the Erathans would destroy Earth. But if they succeeded, they could put an end to the war for good. The mission began in the dead of night, with Earth's best and brightest slipping into the shadows of space. The stealth vessel, equipped with the latest technology, moved silently through the vast emptiness. Sarah's heart pounded as they approached the Erathan fleet, which was hidden behind a series of asteroid fields. The team was tense but focused. There were no second chances here. The slightest mistake could give them away. As they got closer to their target, Sarah couldn't help but think of all the people who were depending on them. The entire world was holding its breath. The infiltration was a success. They managed to sneak past the Erathan patrols and reach the heart of the enemy's fleet. It was a nerve-wracking experience. Every step they took, every move they made, had to be precise. One wrong move, and their mission, and their lives, would be over. Sarah and her team reached the control center of the planetary cannons. They set to work, hacking into the Erathan systems and trying to disable the weapons. It wasn't easy. The technology was advanced, and the systems were heavily guarded. But the humans were determined. They had learned a lot in the past few months. They knew how to use their enemy's own systems against them. Just as the team began to disable the cannons, the alarms blared. The Erathans had detected them. "Time to go," Sarah shouted, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. The mission had entered its final stage. The team fought their way back to the stealth vessel, narrowly escaping capture. Their hearts raced as they sped through space, the Erathan fleet in hot pursuit. It was a dangerous escape, but they made it out in the end. The mission had been a success. The planetary cannons were now disabled, and the Erathans' plans had been foiled. Humanity had once again shown that it was not to be underestimated. Back on Earth, the leaders received the news with a sense of relief. The threat had been neutralized, at least for now. But they knew the war wasn't over. The Erathans would come again, but humanity was ready. And no matter how many times the aliens tried to break them, they would never surrender. The storm was still coming. But this time, humanity had the strength to face it head-on. The battle for Earth had reached its most critical point. The Erathans had underestimated humanity once again, and they were about to learn just how wrong they were. The unexpected success of the sabotage mission had been a major blow to the Erathans, but it wasn't the end. It had only set the stage for what would come next. Now, Earth had one last opportunity to prove that they were more than just survivors. They were warriors. Back on Earth, the world's leaders gathered in secret to discuss the next steps. The damage done by the Erathans had been immense. Cities lay in ruins, countless lives had been lost, and the world had been pushed to its limits. But humanity had shown time and time again that it was unbreakable. The spirit of survival and unity had only grown stronger. Earth wasn't just defending itself anymore, it was fighting back. Commander Sarah Ellis, the leader of the successful mission, stood with her team in a secure military bunker. The world was watching their every move. They had dealt a significant blow to the Erathans, but everyone knew the war was far from over. The Erathans were relentless, and now they would come with even more fury. Sarah looked at her team, soldiers, engineers, and scientists, each of them having given their all for this mission. They had all been part of a global effort to protect their planet, and now they were about to take the fight to the enemy. It was time to go on the offensive. The plan was simple in its concept, but risky in execution. They would launch a direct assault on the Erathan Command Center, the heart of the enemy's operations. The human fleet had grown stronger, their ships now equipped with the latest technology and weapons. The best engineers and scientists had worked tirelessly to develop a new kind of weapon, one that would cripple the Erathans for good. The human fleet moved into position, their ships cloaked and ready for the strike. Earth had managed to secure a fleet of fighters, stealth ships, and warships, all working together in a unified force. The skies above Earth had never looked more intimidating, filled with the determination of humanity's might. As the fleet approached the Erathan Command Center, Sarah took a moment to reflect on everything that had led to this point. She thought of the innocent lives lost, of the cities destroyed, of the countless families left without homes. But she also thought of the resilience and strength that had emerged in the face of these challenges. Humans were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their right to exist, to thrive, and to protect what they held dear. The battle began with a massive exchange of fire. The Erathans were ready for the attack, and they unleashed everything they had. Their ships were massive, and their weapons were devastating. But the humans were not intimidated. They fought with everything they had. Every ship was filled with determination. Every pilot was driven by the thought of saving their world. Sarah's ship led the charge, cutting through the Erathan fleet with surgical precision. The Erathans were stunned by the human tactics. Their once imposing ships were now being dismantled, one by one, by the relentless offensive strategy of the humans. Earth had proven it could fight back, and the Erathans had not been prepared for this level of resistance. The battle raged on for hours, with neither side willing to give up. But as time passed, it became clear that the humans had the upper hand. The Erathans were losing their grip on the situation. Their ships, once thought to be invincible, were now vulnerable to the advanced weapons humanity had developed. In the midst of the battle, a breakthrough occurred. Sarah's team, working in the heart of the Erathan fleet, successfully disabled the main weapons system controlling the enemy's largest ships. The Erathans had no way to respond. Their once proud fleet was falling apart, their ships either destroyed or fleeing for survival. The humans were not just defending their planet, they were claiming victory. But there was still one last challenge to face: the Erathan Command Center itself. It was the final stronghold of the alien race, and it was heavily guarded. Sarah knew that they had to make one final push. With her team by her side, she led the charge directly into the heart of the enemy's territory. The command center was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was a towering structure, filled with alien technology that hummed with energy. The Arathans had fortified it beyond recognition, but humanity's resolve was stronger. The team fought their way through the defenses, determined to finish what they had started. As they reached the control room, the Arathans made one last desperate attempt to stop them. But it was too late. The humans had already infiltrated their systems, and with a final strike, they shut down the command center. The Arathans' control over their fleet was severed. Victory had been achieved. As Sarah and her team stood amidst the wreckage, they could hardly believe what they had just accomplished. The Arathans, once seen as the unstoppable force of the galaxy, had been defeated by the courage, unity, and ingenuity of humanity. The galaxy would never forget what had happened that day. Earth had proven its worth. The human race had shown that it would not be dominated. It had fought back against an empire that thought it could crush them and emerged victorious. The world celebrated, but there was no time for rest. The victory was monumental, but there were still challenges ahead. Earth's leaders knew that this war had forever changed the galaxy's balance of power. Humanity had proven its strength, and the universe would never look at Earth the same way again. But for now, they could take pride in one undeniable fact. Humanity had not only survived, they had triumphed.